Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, let's chat sometime today if you want. Yeah, sorry, I had no reception where I was on Friday. Yeah, I really want to connect with you, just short note further away than. Cool. Yeah, yeah. Next week is good. Cool. Okay. Well, I can just give a quick update. So Mike and I are looking at right now we're looking at expanding the notion of collection in um, the ladle algorithms. And so what we noticed is that um, the collection operations need a refined expression over and above the monad operations. And so we're looking at a variety of things to capture those. And
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Vlad.
Hey, Vlad.
I was just giving a quick update because Mike isn't going to be here. Today's the eclipse, and but anyway, I'll just give a complete my brief update. So Mike and I are looking at the notion of collection as characterized in the ladle algorithm, and beginning to expand this idea. So we're looking at collections where you want to refine the API beyond what's captured by the monad that corresponds to Levere theory. One idea is to use geometric theories, but we're also just looking at kind of lifting some of the apparatus of the Levere theory up one level. So I want to be able to make this idea more precise, but that would require going deep. So I'll just stop there and just say, what we're really doing is just refining the notion of collection so that it and then looking at how that impacts the distributive law, what it means in terms of what the distributive law has to preserve when you expand the thing that is a collection out past being just a monad. So that's the bulk of the work from last week.
It sounds pretty cool. So what kinds of things would a collection expose? Like,
well, I mean, what we want to be able to expose a very rich notion of collection. So not just sets, but or lists or bags, but potentially other kinds of things like a field. From our point of view, a field might be a collection.
Okay.
Right, and so there are kinds of things that we want to be able to express that include exceptions, like everything has an inverse except the zero, as an example, and we don't have that capability with the Levere theory.
So you can't do like pointed sets.
No, pointed sets can be expressed as a Levere theory, but that's a different. It's not quite the same. Yeah.
Okay.
We want to be able to do exceptions.
So is that like kind of a morphism that goes to nowhere, or?
No. Just the equational theory. The pointed sets, are positively stated. You want to be able to state negative things. So
Yeah,
that's
interesting.
that. So those are some. But really, I suspect actually that the phenomena that we're looking at is not just the enrichment of the Levere theory, the geometric theory. Really doing is taking the Levere theory up a level, so that it shows up. Because when you run the Levere algorithm, you get a monad, or you get a correspondence between the theory and the monad. But what we really want is the extra structure to show up. It's like you want the algebras of the monad to show up um, at the monadic level. So it's like you're lifting the algebras and the operations of the algebras up one level. And an example that comes to my mind, and this is a fairly naive way of characterizing it, but sort of the categorical level of some of the groupness of a group would be like taking sometimes they're called Hopf monads, where you've got a monad and a comonad glued. You've got a map that goes between them that's called the antipodal map. So the antipodal map is like the inverse. The monad and the comonad are you can think of them as the kind of pairs of elements, and so this Hopf structure is like the categorical level of the group structure. And I suspect, I could be completely wrong about this, but I suspect that what we want to do is to find a way to lift structures like that. So if you wrote down the Levere theory of a group, you'll get these algebras of the monad which correspond to the groups. But what we really want is for this all to show up at the same level as the monadic API. And that would be much more like, this Hopf monad kind of structure. And then it's very clear what the constraints on the distributive law are. But so far, I haven't found a way to characterize this lifting of the lifting of the apparatus. So
You think that to talk about the distributive law, you need to like talk about it in like the lifted version of it? Like
no, the distributive law remains the same. What we're really saying is, if you want to expand the API that is the collection at the monadic level, then you want to expand the sets of things that the distributive law preserves, right? So when you do your distribution, right, you've now got something more than map, unit, and flat map that have to be effectively preserved by the distributive law. So you've got this extra structure that has to be preserved by the distributive law. So, but if the extra structure isn't there to talk about preserving, then it's much harder to talk about how it applies. How the distributive law is coherent with the rest of the structure, right? And that's sort of the trouble that we got into in thinking about it as doing something to the algebras. What I conjecture we need to do is to find a uniform way to lift this other structure, so that then it's very natural to express how the distributive law extends. So anyway, that
sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Anyway, long-winded, short update.
That's cool.
Yeah. All right. Let's see this ideal adversary.
Questionably ideal adversary, I guess, but yeah, for sure. Do you guys mind if I share screen real quick?
No, please do.
Cool. Can you see me?
I can see the screen.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, so I guess it might be cool to kind of just like show it in a basic situation, and then if interesting, I can do like a kind of a high level walkthrough of what it does.
Sure.
Cool. All right, so this is like the most basic kind of round robin, which is kind of interesting for a bunch of reasons, but one of them being that, so here, okay, so the red messages you can see are kind of marked as finalized. These are blocks that will never be reverted. This is interesting just because kind of each message kind of subsequently finalizes a message exactly and behind it, which is pretty cool. Kind of see it just like keeps making progress. Yeah, pretty fun. I'll show you another one real quick, and then we can talk about it. Yeah, so when we get full propagation, which is like every validator communicates a message to every other validator every round, we kind of get finality on the block, one or two behind. Should always be one.
You mean two behind?
Yeah, two behind. Sorry. Kind of the head of the chain, which is also pretty cool. So we get, faster finality here for each block.
Yeah, it's like it's the normal kind of speed for like two-phase commits or anything like that.
Yeah. Cool. And then I guess it might make sense for me to kind of go into what it's actually doing. Kind of the interesting bit of code is here. So we kind of ask ourselves this question: do we have estimate safety on a specific estimate? So we're asking about a specific block. Will this block ever be reverted? Right. And so the first thing we have to do is we have to define something called free blocks. And so free blocks are blocks that exist and fulfill two conditions. The first one is that some validator hasn't seen it. Some other validator hasn't seen it. And the second thing is that it has the potential, it might not, we're not sure yet, but it has the potential to kind of change that validator's estimate off of the estimate we're trying to attack. So a free block is a block that has the potential to change someone's mind away from what we're trying to attack.
Yeah. So basically it's a new latest block from another validator that isn't on the same chain as the block we're attacking.
Yeah, exactly. And some validator hasn't seen it.
Based upon the view that this validator is considering.
Yeah, exactly. But interestingly, actually, so yeah. But the thing is, like, if in their view, every single validator is building on top of the block that they're asking the question about, if every single validator is building on top of that, and there are no blocks that could possibly change anyone's mind, then they can be sure that that block is final. It's like at a most basic level, if there are no free blocks, if there are no blocks that could change anyone's mind, and everyone's building on that kind of the block you're asking the question about, then you're safe.
Oh my god, is that all you did?
No, there's more than that. Thank God, there's more.
No, that's so cool though. No, that's super cool. Is that, I mean, but what I mean by all you did is that the safety check?
So that was like the very first implementation. That's like the super lower bound. Oracle kind of asked the question: are there any blocks that could change anyone's mind? And if there's not, then it says we're safe. But then there's a level after that where things get a bit more involved.
Great. Good.
So now we have this like set of blocks that could possibly change people's mind. And so we kind of, for each block, we kind of try and attack on that block. And then we kind of say, you can imagine this is probably pretty inefficient, but you can kind of imagine that, like, if for none of the blocks that could change anyone's mind, we can actually change their mind to it and attack on that, then we're safe also. But if for any of them, we can kind of change your mind to that, then you're not safe. So the next thing we do for the block is we kind of get the viewables. And so the viewables are this set of messages that we kind of show to each validator that they haven't seen yet. So this is messages that, like, to some degree, this is kind of also like free blocks, but there's kind of a set of messages that each validator hasn't seen. And we kind of selectively pick from that set to build the subset that kind of gives our target estimate the highest weight. And so this is where it gets a little tricky. And I'm not totally sure. This is where it gets questionably ideal. But I'm not totally sure that it's, always selecting the best possible subset, but it's doing a pretty good job. And then after that, we kind of just run the adversary. And the adversary pretty much, sorry, there's one more thing I have to mention. it only considers this if all of the validators are actually building on top of the candidate estimate, which seems like a kind of a weird thing to attack. But it kind of makes things simpler just to like get things up and running for the first time. So pretty much everyone can be classified as voting against the attacker. And so there's pretty much only one loop we just run through. We try and make a bet that's voting against, or we make our model validators and stuff, and then we kind of run through, try and make a bet voting against our estimate that we're trying to revert. If we can, we show it to everyone. Otherwise, we kind of keep on trying. And yeah, that's the questionably ideal adversary.
So the questionable part is about like how you like the viewables, or like what's the questionable part?
Yeah, the questionable part is, am I always picking the best possible viewables?
Mm-hmm. So here's what I was gonna do.
Yeah.
I was just gonna like assume that all latest blocks that are not on the same fork as the like block that's being attacked. I'll just assume that they're all on the same fork. So I just like kind of aggregate them in this way that like I should not ever be able to do in real life. I mean, at least not always be able to do. And so I just kind of assume that like, so imagine if we had like this kind of ternary choice thing.
Yeah.
And like the attacker was attacking choice 1, then like, we would just like assume that like anyone on choice 0 and choice 2 have like the same, are actually the same. We just like assume that like 0 and 2 are the same, and then do the binary.
Okay. Yeah, I have to think about that.
So the idea is like, imagine if instead of like looking at the individual blocks, you just kind of did a binary consensus based on assuming that everyone who isn't on the same block is on like the same other block.
Yeah, okay. That seems like it would make it much simpler.
Well, I mean, it would be, so all I'm saying, I mean, it seems like it might be less of a close bound.
Yeah.
But it's like obviously a bound. I think this, I'm not sure that this is obviously a bound.
Yeah,
Because
that's the point.
It might be that like people who are on blocks that aren't the adversary's, victim block, but not the one that's like the best for the viewables. Are you working on convincing them? Do you convince them?
Yeah. So when I get the viewables, the first thing I do is I kind of try and show them messages that are on our target estimate, and then from other than that, I try and show them messages that are kind of not on the target estimate, but also not on the estimate we're trying to revert, and so they're just kind of elsewhere.
Jesus. Yeah.
So yeah, it gets
it does get hairy about. Well, I mean, so basically, I remember trying to reason through this.
Yeah.
And I remember finding that there was like some kind of there are cases where you have to convince people to go to a lower weight estimate first before you go to, rather than always going for the higher one.
Oof. Yeah. Okay. It seems much better than to kind of convert to binary if possible. So
well, I mean, it's totally possible. It's just less of a. It's like a more conservative lower bound.
Yeah.
You have to go. You have to do some kind of saddle point kind of thing where you take them off of where they are into a lower region before you get them to another.
So, or let me put it this way. Like, I think I haven't been able to. So I'm not sure right now. I don't remember how I thought that was possible, but I remember that being possible. But I can't really prove it right now.
Oh well, I mean, there definitely some phenomena like that exists, right? I mean, but the thing I'm worried about is the complexity. Then, I mean, what is the complexity even in the case?
Well, that's why we want to just like assume it away, kind of.
Yeah. With just binary, it's not too bad. If we can even though it's more of a conservative kind of lower bound, if we can just make it a binary thing, just for complexity, it seems like it'd make it much.
The binary thing is really nice because it's like easier to audit, and
it's much easier.
And easier to compute, and it'll be cool if we find that it's like in practice good enough, right?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Do you want to run the simulation with like half the messages failing or something like that?
Yeah. Sure.
Settings up high, yeah.
Yeah. Let's do like 10 rounds, 10 messages, 10 rounds. So it's like we're getting 10 out of 25 messages or something, or something like that. 10 out of 20.
Okay, let's see.
Sorry. What's happening?
Is the code checked in?
I think so. It's not. It should run. Give me a sec. Oh, sorry. That's my bad. Just have some weird settings things going on. Lots of experimentation. Yeah, cool. So we got finality on some of them. This is not a particularly interesting chain, as you can see, because the weights didn't work out so well. But we did get finality.
It's still cool. Do you want to run it some more?
Yeah, it starts getting quite slow. Is the only thing, because do you know
why? Is it the deep copies?
I actually think it's because I check estimate safety on every single block that exists, just because I was like, screw it. I just want to see what happens. So yeah, I don't actually. Yeah, I recheck everything. So.
Okay. Oh, there we go. That's cool. Oh, it's cool that we don't have new safety also. That's interesting.
Yeah. It doesn't always make progress. Interestingly, actually, what it usually does is it doesn't make it kind of like doesn't make any progress for a while, and then all of a sudden it finalizes like 100 blocks in a round or something bizarre. And it seems to me like what it kind of is like this thing of like, if there's a single validator if there's like a single free block existing for a single validator and they just, unluckily don't happen to see it, then our adversary always says we can attack on it, even though like we actually kind of can't in reality.
Oh yeah. So basically it's just this bound is like super low.
It's like essentially super low. And as soon as like one little trivial condition changes, it kind of just like goes, oh, cool. Okay, we're good now. Yeah.
Do you want to try running with 3 validators?
Yeah, sure. Where's that setting? Cool. I guess we still have 10 messages, so this is going to be,
too many. Yeah. 3.
Cool. Yeah, you can see it's not the most efficient thing, but yeah, I guess it's on 3 validators. It kind of.
This looks good. This looks really good though. I mean, this looks good. That's a lot of finalized blocks for the amount of messages that we have on here. We have like 38 messages.
Yeah.
And we finalized I don't know how many blocks.
15 or something. Cool.
Like 19 or something.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll I guess I'll start thinking about the binary thing. That's it for the demo.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool though. Yeah. 18 blocks finalized with 38 messages. Like that's pretty solid.
Yeah. Cool.
With 38 blocks, I mean, who knows exactly how many message propagations there were? Well, I guess we do. 30.
Yeah, something like that.
Because we have 3 messages per round and like 3 to 10 rounds.
Yeah. Sure.
So that's pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty awesome, I think.
Yeah, it's great. It'll definitely be nice to start kind of thinking about it in the binary way. So I'll kind of reconsider, I guess. That's something.
Yeah, I mean, but I do like the quick if there's no viewables or like then like give up.
Yeah. Yep. Cool.
It's not gonna work so well when there's Byzantine faults though.
Yeah, I know. That's when it gets hard.
Yeah, but if we just do it for the binary, we should it'll be just the same probably. The main main question for the binary one is how to set up the viewables basically. It's still always like that's always I guess one of the finickier parts.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Because that's where we get a lot of the efficiency gain anyways in the adversary calculation. Because we just like drop lots of blocks, lots of possible messages, and only consider the ones that are really like useful for the attacker somehow.
Yeah,
maybe that thing needs to be renamed. I don't know. I was never able to think of a great name for it. So that was really cool. Thanks a lot, Nate.
Yeah,
Sure.
thanks. That was really nice. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Cool. Any other updates?
Yeah, I can give some updates. I don't have too much Casper stuff. On the consensus front, I've been kind of thinking about non-deterministic state replication. It's kind of not necessarily that interesting, but basically, like, sometimes there might be non-deterministic choices. And the idea is, like, it would be cool if we could provide um, a way for, like, that to happen in a way that's, like, minimally gameable. And basically, I just kind of do this kind of secret randomness thing that Vitalik came up with for proposing blocks only, and then, like, force validators to use that data, that, like, pre-committed entropy, when they're making non-deterministic choices in the kind of virtual machine. So you can imagine, you know, implementing a non-deterministic language like this. And the other kind of the other idea is that, like, you can just give the validators, like, a lot of freedom to choose which reduction to choose when there's a non-deterministic thing. But in that case, so, and there's kind of a benefits and costs, right? The benefit is that maybe the validators know how to achieve something more efficiently by making the right non-deterministic choice. On the other hand, then they might be able to game things.
Yeah, again, this ultimately boils down to market on liveness.
Yeah, or like somehow, like, the idea that, like, and anything that, like, hasn't that like hasn't been produced yet, or, like, can't be fully verified, could potentially be, like, paid for. I mean, somehow, like, the data that you already have is, like, somehow they have, like, a slightly, like, very different kind of economics.
Yeah, I mean, the way I was thinking about it was with non-deterministic reductions. If there's this issue of fairness, right? So, if you put economics around the transactions as a way to essentially settle races, then it's not going to be fair.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
That's what it comes down to, is you won't explore branches, and so
Yeah, and so that's maybe a case for the pre-commitment, so that, like, there is no freedom later on to be opportunistic with validators.
right. So, but it doesn't really, I still think that it's going to come down a market on brand, how else to do it, because if you make it arbitrary, right, if you make it just all done with randomness, that's also going to be completely unsatisfying, because maybe the good branches are the ones that are not selected by the randomness.
Right. Yeah, and so that's what it means. So, like, you can't really use that as a way to, like, optimize, like, some program's execution by only going down, like, the successful branch or something like that.
Yeah. Cool. That's interesting.
So that's, like, kind of on the consensus side, but I've done more kind of work and research on other stuff. Notably, the ENS workshop was last weekend, and we spent a lot of time talking about, like, name system stuff, governance, auctions, dispute resolution, client side blacklisting to prevent phishing and other kinds of abuse. It was cool, and kind of as a result, I've started working a little bit on this kind of, like, reputation system for augurs, for oracles. and it's kind of interesting, but it's still relatively early stages. I basically have like not that much progress. I mean, I have like a security parameter and security definitions, um, but that isn't enough to really fully specify the thing. I need to have like more um kind of more assumptions, but I'm kind of like trying to like see the scope of basically I've kind of narrowed down on basically the simplest problem, which is like kind of maybe unsurprisingly like Oracle on a bit, um and basically like trying to like get, can always get a value out of the Oracle. That's easy. The question is like how should the different reputations of the different, like of the participants evolve over time. um and like, I mean, so far what I've been able to say is like what are the conditions that have to be true for that to be safe, from the point of view of Sybil attacks. um and so that's kind of interesting. The interesting thing there was that I ended up doing like another ideal adversary kind of thing, um for the to kind of like, think about and like implement my safety definition. So that was kind of neat. um but still a work in progress. But I think, but that's like some of the main research that I was working on. Another thing I've worked on kind of today actually is, for a while we've been thinking about kind of how to reserve gas for future like delayed calls in the virtual machine. um and kind of we think about, and there's we've come up with a bunch of kind of solutions where you buy gas in the future now and then you have your call executed. um Today was the first time I really ever really considered more details of in protocol options market for
It's like
gas.
oil's futures.
Cool.
No, not futures, but options, right? So option futures we kind of had already considered,
Right.
where you just like pay up front now for gas spent later, that like the protocol kind of delivers to you via like, forcing blocks at that height to execute that call. um but for options it's a little different, because like, you don't necessarily have your call executed, but you have the right to add a certain price, at that time. uh and it's like an interesting problem, because we have to kind of have a default decision, because you might not be able to get a transaction in at that time, which basically means that like, um you're gonna have to like either prepay, or like, some when you buy the option, or sometime in between, in order to make sure that you can actually cover the strike price and quantity for the call that you have an option for, which would like, presumably need to be executed. Well, I mean, definitely would need to be executed in the event that you don't send any messages.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, Nash Foster and I were thinking about some stuff like that. The one thing that it gets really complicated, like we're working on a gas price for Rolang, and it gets really complicated because we have different threads, and so what you want is to not have, so a particular contract gets an allocation of gas, but it has multiple threads inside it. So you have to allocate the gas out to the different threads. And you have to do this on a runtime basis, right? So that, threads don't get stuck because they're starved for gas that's available somewhere else.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that definitely makes it more difficult. Like right now, I'm kind of reserving gas on a single thread, and it's quite relatively easy.
Yeah,
If I have to deliver gas in a concurrent environment, that would be more interesting and difficult. But my default thought is basically just to say, okay, as long as you have a way to address the channel that you're, or like the kind of the thread that you're paying for gas for, I could reserve gas there. as our like portion of the gas limit.
Yeah, it's just that what you don't want is you don't want to do a lot of messaging overhead with some central resource, because it then ends up being not nearly as concurrent.
Yeah, I think that's right. No, I think you need to kind of, yeah, that's an interesting one. So then you want like basically a distributed options market, and I think that's totally possible as long as the options price model can be calculated locally, and the schedule for gas in that thread is available locally.
Yeah. So what we're
Yes,
doing,
that sounds like a fun problem.
yeah, it is kind of fun. So we're going back and forth between the gas estimate, right? So you estimate up front how much it's going to cost to go at least a steps down the line, right? And based upon information coming back from the estimate, you get estimate for each thread of activity, right? So then you can do portions that way, but of course that's always going to be just an estimate, because you don't know which branches you're going to end up going down. So you have to adjust at runtime. You can't do it all ahead of time. You have to adjust at runtime, and what we're trying to do is minimize the overhead of the runtime adjustment.
Can't you just kind of like have a bound and like keep going until you hit it?
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. Is we have a bound, but as soon as you no, but the bound is the bound, and you know you don't have you you you- um some threads may run out beforehand, right? So, or your upper bound is too,
Um,
or your upper bound is too costly.
yeah. So that's tricky. So the kind of thing that I kind of have is like two upper bounds. One on how much gas you could have had spent prior to this kind of step, and another is like how much is they're being paying for all the concurrent stuff. So like I might have like 100 gas that I'm budgeting, and but like after 10 gas, uh, it kind of will throw an exception. Because like that will be fine as long as my computation only requires like 9 gas on like a bunch of different threads. But yeah, that is totally tricky. I mean, basically, like, and this is something I only considered basically. Yeah, and in one of these cases where you have like your transactions fan out into lots of different threads,
Yeah,
and each of the threads doesn't know how much gas has been consumed by the other ones, and therefore you could overspend.
that's exactly it. That's
And
right.
so the idea there is like you only get to the 10 on each thread, even though globally, like it's allowed to spend 100.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but the thing, like, let's say you estimate for one of your threads, but it turns out the thread only needs 2. So you want to yield back the extra gas in case some other thread is starving.
Right. Yeah. But then
Right.
you got to have like this interactive protocol for telling
That's exactly
if
right.
there's any.
And the more overhead that protocol costs, the more it costs you in terms of your computation, and potentially the more you realize the computation becomes.
Right.
So that's the tricky bit. We're trying to maximize concurrency, minimize coordination.
But also account for all and like just allocate the gas effectively.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, concurrent gas allocation and metering is, super interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
a lot of fun.
one idea, and I mean, this idea is kind of, I think, in some way, the kind of state of the art on this is basically that like every call has to have gas, that it will like, you know, so basically like the transaction provides gas to the first contract, which then provides gas to which and it's like, by the way, single threaded, and it can send out multiple calls to different contracts on different threads, but it needs to allocate them gas, and then like they in turn can go and allocate that gas further, and so somehow the gas is kind of shipped to where it's consumed, and but in this case, yeah, there's no refunding of
Yeah,
like
but
unused gas.
yeah, yeah. You're operating under an assumption that we don't have. We have more threads inside the contract.
Yeah, but you could kind of probably like make it so that the contract has to assign each thread a certain amount of gas, and then only gets to use that gas.
Well, that's what we do anyway, right? But you still, because it's always an estimate, you still must have either you have runtime coordination or you're just willing to live with some threads are when they shouldn't be because other threads have excess gas.
Yeah, I mean, I think like as long as every thread has excess gas, it's fine.
Yeah, I don't know how to guarantee that.
You have to know how much gas the threads will consume before you run them.
Yeah, I mean, you can give estimates, and your estimates are going to be way, way, way over the top. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just have to over allocate. Like, yeah.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so it ends up making the computation cost a lot.
Well, it ends up being risky because it could end up running a lot and burning through a lot of gas.
Yeah.
But it might not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So that's totally an interesting conversation, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I gotta jump off here because I've got 8:00 and I need to get some stuff done beforehand. But this is really fun.
I have one update, Greg, before you go, just real quick. I mean, I ran across the differential propositional calculus from John Ombre. You familiar with it?
Differential for propositional calculus.
Yeah. What I like about it is it extends propositional calculus with a set of terms describing aspects of change or difference. And this links it with the process calculus with a theoretical basis. For example, processes that take place in a universe of discourse or transformations that map onto the source universe onto a target universe. And this it gives me insight. It's probably not efficient, but it gives me a lot of insight into all the issues we're dealing with. And we have a system that changes. D goes from the outside to the inside here. Whoops. And the problems we're dealing with, things are like, well, how do these things get to be in the same state wherever D happens to be? And we can represent that as a set of differential equations, which is pretty cool. And it leads to your functional derivative idea, or gives insight into that.
That's really nice. Yeah, I mean, basically, all I was interested in, from back in June, was to try to get a relationship between the operational semantics and the derivative. Right, that's the thing that's been nagging at me for about 15, 20 years, is that we have this nice notion of derivative, which gives us a notion of change. We've got the operational semantics, which gives us a notion of change, and the two are completely not correlated. And then when you go and you discover the notion of derivative that of a data type, then again, it's still not correlated to the delta that happens in the operational semantics. And so the insight that I had back in June was just, I can actually force the issue. I can force the coincidence by having only rewrite rules that are organized around the derivative, right? So it's all I only look at those rewrite rules where either you're adding a hole or you're eliminating a hole, and then it turns out that we have enough expressive power in those rewrite rules to capture, all computation, right? It could have turned out that it was either too restrictive or that it was too expressive, but it turns out that it still lives in that sweet spot of functional completeness.
Right. Yeah, the thing that struck me here was the set of terms describing change or difference as the rewrite rules. Okay, so from the propositional calculus, I can get immediately to your notion of the rewrite rules in the context of the calculus. I don't know if you followed that.
No, I didn't follow that. I'd have to look at the link. But yeah, that's kind of interesting. That's definitely interesting. There's been a lot of notions of derivative floated, but the one that seems to have the most
yeah.
Well, no, there is.
What I was saying, Greg, is it's in the context of the derivative that the rewrite rules are expressed. So that has a direct correspondence to what you're talking about.
I see. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, definitely send me a link. If you're interested, there's the differential categories, and so far, no one. I mean, it's obvious that there's a link between the McBride derivative and I think it's Seeley, Cockett, and Blute, who have developed the differential categories based upon Earhart's interpretations of linear logic. So Earhart came up with some differential categories, and that got significantly formalized. So yeah, I recommend looking at differential categories because they give enough of a characterization to give the usual differentiation notions, but entirely at the categorical level. It's not clear how no one's drawn the clear line between that and the McBride derivative, but it's obvious that they are related. It's just no one's worked out the details. So you might want to see if this differential in the propositional calculus is related, because it seems like it would be hard not to be.
I looked at it a little bit categorical derivative, but I guess for somebody with my background, putting it in the context of the propositional calculus makes it easy to get insight into the next level, which you're going above and beyond in understanding this.
Cool, very cool. I really do have to jump off. It was good fun. I'll see you guys. Next week.
Bye, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
See you next week.
Hey, Vlad.
Hey, Denny.
I have a question that you might be able to answer. Vitalik might be the